Okay, how's it going, guys? So I thought I'd do a little bit of a state of the collection video. I've not really been into watches for very long, so my collection is fairly humble, and it's sort of the early beginnings of a collection, I guess you'd say. And I don't have any sort of really expensive Rolexes or Philippe Pateks or anything like that, and I don't have any vintage watches as yet, but I do have my eye on a few on eBay, so we'll see what happens. And I've also got a couple of watches on my Christmas list, including an Apple Watch actually. So yeah, there's going to be a few more added to the collection. I've also bought quite a few and then sold them again because they weren't quite right. And anyway, let's talk about kind of what I've got, and we'll explain a little bit about each watch and yeah, why I like them, I guess. So as you can tell, I've got quite a few Seikos and quite a few Casios. I've got a German watch, got a Chinese watch, no Swiss watches yet. I do have a couple of Swiss watches on the I want one of those sort of list, but let's just go through them. So starting at the far left here, this is probably the, I think this is the cheapest watch. This is the W-217H, and this is my, it's very much my sort of when I want to wear a watch that I don't mind if it gets scratched up or smashed or whatever. That's my go-to beater watch. Very comfortable, very perfectly sort of formed in terms of nice big clear display, very light, and it's just a really good value for money watch. 50 meters water resist, so you know you're going to be able to wear it swimming and all the rest of it. Absolutely fine, and it's a real throwaway watch, but it actually it conforms to the wrist really nicely and just very, very comfortable. I liked it so much I bought the negative version. Not a huge fan of this bracelet. These metal bracelets, they tend to, the cheap Casio bracelets, they tend to pull the hairs out of your arms and all the rest of it. But I actually would have preferred this negative on the cheap plastic strap, to be perfectly honest with you. But either way, I like the look of this one. They've taken the colour out of the surround on the display there, and it's got a very nice clear negative display, and that one is the B650WB. But yeah, big fan of this form factor. It just seems to fit medium-sized male sort of wrists. I'm not particularly big boned. I'm fairly sort of petite, but I think that's a nice size for sort of like a medium-sized guy, if that makes sense. Moving on, this is the 168. This is the negative 168, which is the 168WEM, A168WEM, I believe I got that right. And yeah, this is a lovely little watch. I do like the fact that the negative is very black and it matches with the surround black, so it kind of looks quite uniform across the whole face of the watch. Very easy to scratch. All of these cheaper Casios are very easy to mark and scratch, but I do really like this one. I do wear this one probably more often than some of the other cheaper Casios. I've done a video on this one. This is the gold world time Casio. Quite a nifty little thing. It's quite sort of quite kitschy, quite sort of trendy, cheap Casio kind of vibe going on. Some sort of quite specific USP features with the world map on the display there and things like that. So yeah, it's kind of a fun little watch. I don't wear this one that often, but I do enjoy the design of the watch. Moving on, a couple of G-Shocks here. So this is the that's a GWM5610-1ER, and I think what I like about this one is it's one of the watches that are available right now which is most like the original. Is it 1985? I think it's 1985, the original G-Shock Square that came out in the the mid 80s. This one is the most similar to the original. There's a couple of small differences, but in terms of what's available right now, this is the most closely aligned to the original G-Shock Square. There's a couple of sort of reissues that are more accurate than this one, but this one is relatively cheap and it's just a good all-round G-Shock basically. And then they have the this is a GWB5600BC. Lovely little watch, packed full of features. I've done a video on this watch which has had, I don't know, 150,000 views or something, so a few of you will probably know about this watch already. But yeah, it's a lovely little G-Shock with lots of functionality with the Bluetooth and all the rest of it. Like I said, I've kind of covered that quite well in my other video, so I won't go into too much detail, but great little G-Shock. I think it's really good value for money in terms of the amount of features you get for the price, so I do think that's a good option. And then we've got the 2100 here, so this is the GA-2100-1A-1ER. And yeah, I'm a big fan of this one. There's a couple of sort of cheap bits about this watch. Like, I don't like the finish on the hands, but you know, it's not, it's under £100, so it's not a massively expensive watch. But I really like the size of it, the sort of the thickness of it, and just the way it wears. It wears really nicely for a larger watch. I think it'd be quite interesting to see what G-Shock does when they release more high spec versions of the 2100. You know, if they get like a metal version, or if they get one that's just got a bit sort of higher finish but keep these proportions. It might detract from the comfortability, because this is very light. This is one of their carbon core watches, so it's quite nice and thin. So it might detract from the sort of, you know, the comfortable factor. But this is a very, very comfortable watch. Obviously, some people are not going to like the look of it at all, but I'm still a big fan of this one. And this one here, so as soon as you start getting into your Casios, I think a lot of people do quite often buy a Casio Royal at some point, because it's such a great value watch. For my money, I prefer this one. So this is the AE-1300WH, and then is it 8AVCF? I'll put a correction on the screen. It's so difficult to remember all these code names, but anyway, this for my money, I think this is a better watch than the Royal. I think it proportionally, it's very, very similar in terms of size and functionality, but this one's more focused on timing. So it has sort of advanced sort of stopwatch features, where you can have several stopwatches running at the same time and things like that, and sort of split times and all the rest of it. So it's very much focused on that. But I do get a kick out of the little display here. When you start to use the stopwatch, everything whizzes around. It's very sort of you know, the 8-year-old in me really likes the way this one functions. And I think just because of the symmetry of the display here, I actually prefer it to the I prefer it over the Casio Royal, which is a hugely popular one. But you know, I think is it 100 meters water resist? Yeah, 100 meters water resist, a 10-year battery, comfortable, light. Obviously, like all these cheaper Casios, they will get scratched up quite easily. G-Shocks are a bit better with that, with the, you know, the raised bezel and things like that. They do tend to last longer, and they're just a bit tougher. But when you're paying not much money for these things anyway, you know, you have to kind of embrace the fact that they're going to get scratched and all the rest of it easily. Anyway, so yeah, that's the Casios. Going to be keeping all of those because I enjoy all of them for different reasons. Moving on to the more sort of proper, you know, mechanical watches. So this is a Laco. So this is a Type B dial Laco. This isn't one of their high-ends one. This is one of their sort of entry-level Lacos, but they're still quite expensive. So they're not sort of super cheap watches. And I think if you look at the history of, you know, pilot watches, Flieger watches, traditionally they would have been worn on the outside of a great big leather coat, and you'd have a great big screen, the sort of 55 millimeters, quite large. This is obviously a much smaller sort of size. So they've kind of sort of bastardized the idea of being, you know, sticking to the tradition of a Flieger pilot watch. But they've kind of just reduced it to fit in with a sort of contemporary sizing. So I was torn between the 42 millimeter and the 39. My wrist being a little bit smaller, I went for the 39 because I just thought it's probably more likely you're going to wear it. And because it's such a big, bold display, it sort of wears larger than it actually is as well. So I think I made the right choice. The only criticism I would have of this one is I would prefer a thicker strap. I think this is 18 millimeters, and I think a 20 millimeter would have worked a bit better. But great loom on this, really great loom. It's been giving me really good accuracy. It's got the Miyota 821A movement in it, which is it's automatic with hand winding. It doesn't hack though, which I have to say it's a little bit disappointing it doesn't hack. So I know some of the Miyotas do hack. By the way, hacking is just basically stopping the second hand, so you can get get it very, very accurate to the atomic clock when you're setting it. So yeah, it doesn't hack, which is a little bit of a niggle for me. You know, maybe if you are thinking about getting a pilot's watch, I do recommend the build quality of this, and I do recommend the look of it. But like I said, yeah, it would be nice to have a hacking movement for that sort of price, because it's not a cheap price. It does have some quite nice sort of machining and decoration to the movement in the back there. It's sapphire, and like I said, yeah, the loom is really, really good. I'll put some shots of the loom up. But yeah, it's, you know, I think if you're slightly bigger wristed than me, definitely go for the 42 millimeter, not the 39. If you're a little bit sort of smaller wristed, then I think the 39 will work better for you, because it kind of looks bigger than it is, even though this is a smaller case size than some of these other watches, it still wears quite big just because of the sort of the type of display, these type B Pilot watch displays. Dials, I should say. Moving on, so this is a little Chinese watch, and I really like this one. It wears very nicely, and I think of all my watches, if I wanted to wear a watch and I knew there was going to be other, watch fans at the other end, I think this one would be, they'd be more interested in this one than many of the other watches here. It's a Seagull 1963. And they've got their own movement in there. Seagull's actually a huge company, and they make lots of movements for other companies. And even though they're not really that well known in a weird sort of way, unless you're into watches basically. But yeah, it's a reissue of a Chinese pilot's watch basically, and it has a column wheel mechanical movement, so not automatic, but it's column wheel chronograph basically. So we press this one here to start the second hand, and this sub dial over here on the right, that will keep track of your minutes, and then you've got the red chronograph hand will keep track of the seconds. Press it again to stop, and then press the bottom right one to reset. And it's just a very pretty dial, very nice proportions. I swapped out the strap on this one because it came with a little sort of a NATO strap, which is a bit cheap and nasty, and also this leather strap, which isn't too bad, but I wanted something with slightly higher quality, so I went for swapping out for this slightly darker leather one. And yeah, very comfortable, and it's just a very attractive watch to the dial is very simple but very attractive proportionally, and there's nice little sort of details in there. This one is a slightly more expensive sapphire crystal version. You can get one which has standard, non-sapphire standard glass, and that one has a little bit more of a dome to it. This one is domed. There is a bit of a dome which gives you a very slight distortion, but I like my watches to be able to be worn quite a lot, and the sapphire does give you a bit more resilience to scratches and the rest of it. But yeah, big fan of this one. It's just a delightful little watch. Moving on to my Seikos. So yeah, I started out with the Seiko 5 Sports, which is kind of like the reissue of the SKX. It's kind of not really, because it's not a true sort of dive watch anymore, but it's lovely proportions on this one, and I've tried a few different straps, and I have to say, since I've put it on this Seiko, it's a formed Uncle Seiko strap, which they've kind of copied the original waffle diver strap, but they've formed it so it fits in with the lugs really snugly. And since I've done that, I've sort of fallen in love with the watch all over again, because it just wears so comfortably, and it matches the black case. It just has this kind of, it's a sort of perfect balance of a little bit stealthy, but there's a very clear dial with the the bright white lume and all the rest of it. And yeah, I'm still a big fan of this watch. I know a lot of Seiko fans do not like this because they say that Seiko have kind of, they've made a fashion watch, and they've tried to replace something that was a true diver. But I think, for most people, they're not using their watches as a dive watch anyway, and 100 meters is fine for most people, and I don't necessarily need a screw down crown or any of the things that they threw away. But the uprated movement, it does have hacking and hand winding, which when you start buying a few different watches, having the hacking and hand winding as well as the automatic is a big boon. It's kind of like, I like all my watches to run. I don't like them just to sit there dead. And if you have lots of watches like these two that do not have hand winding, you end up having to sort of like keep picking them up and shuffling them and just to keep them alive. It's like you're sort of running lots of Tamagotchis at the same time. You just want the things to stay alive. And so yeah, having hacking hand winding does make owning one watch of several makes the experience a little bit nicer. So yeah, but I think proportionally, the SKX. It's such a lovely size, and it's very comfortable. It's got a little bit of sort of presence to its size, and it's just a classic design. It really is it just sort of works proportionally in terms of the size of the bezel to the dial and the curvature of the case itself. It's just a really nice watch. I mean, by all means, if you really want a proper dive watch, you can still get hold of the SKX, the 13 and the 9. Go for one of those, but I still think this is a really good watch, regardless of the criticism Seiko fans have sort of issued it, thrown at it basically. Moving on, So I've got a bit more of a serious diver here. This has got some serious weight to it. This is the watch I pick up when I kind of just really want to know that I'm wearing a watch. It's a little bit, there's a lot of colour and a lot of shine going on here, but it's machined lovely and it feels like real quality. It really does. This is the Seiko Samurai, and this has the 4R35 movement. This has got the 4R36 movement. This has got a 4R35. Basically the same movement, but this one's only got the date complication. This one's got the day date. They both run pretty much exactly sort of 5 seconds faster day. So very, very, they're basically the same movement. Just this one just doesn't have the day on it. But yeah, this is a proper dive watch. It's got proper screw down crown, proper screw down case back. You've also got a dive extension on the strap there. So I do go in the ocean now and again, so it's quite nice that I can pop that out and whack it on top of a wetsuit, and it fits without having to fiddle around with the micro adjustments or anything. And yeah, it's very pretty watch. It feels like absolute quality. It really does feel solid, feels weighty. The bezel movement, the textures and the sort of machining on the case, and the bracelet as well. I mean, the only place they did cheap out slightly is the actual clasp, which is pressed. It's not sapphire, same as with the Seiko 5, it's just hardlex. But you do have this sort of protruding bezel which does protect the glass a little bit. So I've worn a few different Seikos now and I've not had any issues with the hardlex. So I don't necessarily think it's too much of a problem. But it is creeping up into the slightly more expensive watches, so maybe they should have given us sapphire crystal on this one. But either way, still really enjoy it. And like I said, it just feels quality, and you feel the weight, and you know that you're wearing a watch when you wear this one because it's got a fair amount of presence to it. Moving on, so got my only dress watch up here, which is the little SNKL15. And I'm not really into my dress watches, but I think this is such a pretty little dial, such a pretty little watch for very little money. It's almost like a shame not to own this one. I have bought a better bracelet and a couple leather straps, but I've actually not got around to fitting them yet. It's a real fiddle to get these hollow end links out. I've tried twice now and I felt like I was going to break it, so I gave up a little bit, but I will get that onto a better bracelet at some point. But yeah, very, very pretty. It's probably the prettiest dial that you can get for the money out of almost any watch I can imagine. It's just very, very pretty. A couple of little criticisms I guess I could level at it. I don't really think a dress watch should have lume, and this does have lume, and it does take away from the clean aesthetics of the dial. But like I said, I'm not really into my dress watches anyway. I will be getting a slightly more upmarket, maybe a SARB, maybe something like that. I will get a more expensive dress watch at some point, but I think this is a perfect sort of entry level dress watch because it's so pretty and so much value for the money. It is very petite, so if you're a big burly bloke, you're not going to get away with wearing something like that, I don't think. It's obviously subjective, but it is a very petite watch. I think it wears slightly better on a leather strap than it does on the rather disappointing bracelet that Seiko put it on. But you're really paying for the dial and you're paying for the case with one of these, and you're not paying very much at all, so you're getting great value on that one. And this one here, so this is basically my only real proper sort of fake homage, because I guess this is a homage of the original 60s. This is a homage of a Flieger, a proper German watch, but it's made by the German manufacturer that made the original. So that one's kind of like a modern homage, and this one is a modern homage. This is kind of like a fake homage, and this is the only one that I'm quite happy to have a fake one, because the original 62 Mass Seiko, which is Seiko's first dive watch, I think it was issued in 1965, something like that, and you basically can't get the original in decent condition. They're all very, very worn, very, very sort of knackered, and very expensive. They did reissue this one in sort of mid 2000s, or 2012, something like that. But the SLA 017, I think that's right. They did issue it, and it was very, very limited. And I think it was about £4,000, maybe more. And on the second-hand market now, they're going for even more than that. So you basically can't get this this watch at all if you wanted the original without spending a lot of money, and also accepting the fact that if you're getting for an original, then you're going to be, you know, basically having a watch which is quite beat up, and you know you're paying a lot of money for something that's original, but it's not necessarily going to look like a practical daily wear. Whereas this one is a proper dive watch, 200 meters screw down crown. It does have the Seiko movement in there. It's the NH35, and I've been getting really good accuracy with this. It's like -1 per day. It's very comfortable. The proportions on this are just lovely. It does have that kind of proper 1960s proportion. This is the sapphire crystal model, so you do get a fair amount of distortion and sort of with that bulging sapphire, but it does have that proper sort of 60s look. The way it wears, it does wear like a proper vintage watch, because you know it's incredibly accurate to the original, obviously, but it's also not trying to be a fake, because you know they've left the San Martin label on there. We've got a little shark on the crown, a little shark on the screw down case back. The bracelet's surprisingly nice as well for a relatively cheap watch. But yeah, I probably wear this. This is one of my most worn watches, just because it's very comfortable, and the sizing and the proportions are just lovely. And yeah, I've got no issue with not having an original or not having a proper, the Seiko reissue, because I just don't want to spend thousands of pounds on a watch, basically. And I think this is just a lovely little nod, one of the early 60s divers. And yeah, it's a decent watch as well. Like I said, decent accuracy. You've got the Seiko movement in there anyway. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this one, and I do wear it, probably one of my most worn watches, I have to say. And then the last one over here on the right, so this is the SNZG17K. This did actually come on a metal bracelet, but it's not typical sort of Seiko bracelet. It's not amazing quality. And this is kind of like a military field watch, I guess you'd call it. So we have this dial with this recess, loads of great lume on this one, and it has the military 24-hour numbers on there. So you have the standard 12 hours on the inner ring. You have the military time up to 24 hours, basically. And yeah, so I've got a field watch option there, I guess you'd call it. And yeah, I think this is a very, very underrated Seiko watch. There's another Seiko field watch, which gets a lot more love than this one, but I think this is a really good option. And yeah, especially when you start putting it on different straps, it's a real, you can pretty much put this sort of, where it's a monotone watch like this, you can pretty much put it on any type strap you like. I went for this little German handmade, sort of like a 60s style with a leather bund. So it's more of like a Flieger, pilot's watch type strap, to be perfectly honest with you. But I think it works on a sort of, practical field watch. It's got very, very, very clear display. So this, I think, because it's quite cheap and because it's sizing and it's quite sort of neutral looking, and its clarity, it'd be a great watch for buying, like your granddad or something, because it's very, very, very easy to read. Good size display and dial, and very clear hands and clear numerals on there. But I just like it because it's nice to have something a bit different, and it has this, it's sort of halfway between a proper military watch and a Flieger watch in its design. But yeah, it's a nice little watch. So let's just go over a couple of little minuses. So like I said, it is a bit irritating when you start to buy more and more watches. It is a bit irritating when you don't have hand wind, and these two Seikos don't have hand wind. This has the 7S26 movement, and this has the 7S36 movement. You can technically sort of hack them, because if you pull it out and then wind backwards, you can kind of make the second hand stutter, so you can sort of hack them. I'm sure that's probably not great for the movement. I did do some research, and the jury is out there a little bit whether that's bad for the movement. But yeah, so I for my future watches, I think I probably will try to get everything that is automatic and hand wind as well. It just seems to suit what I like a bit more. But yeah, there you go. That's kind of my little random spread of watches. I'm sure some of those in there you're just going to hate. Some of those might float your boat. I think it'd be nice to get a Swiss watch. It'd be nice to get a GMT watch, and there's a couple of classic designs that I've had my eye on. As you can tell, I do like my Seikos, and there's a couple of sort of more higher end Seikos that, you know, I have to limit myself. I don't want to spend more than about, you know, £300 or £400 on a watch. As soon as you start creeping over £500 and in towards the thousands, it starts to become a whole different type of hobby, I think, getting into your watches. And I really enjoy my cheap watches. I get almost as much enjoyment out of the cheap watches, or sometimes even more, than I do out of the more you know, the more expensive ones. But anyway, I just thought I'd start the camera rolling and yeah, talk about my current growing collection. If you've been following my channel, you've probably noticed that I've sort of jumped into this with 2 feet a little bit, jumped into the deep end. We'll see what I find on eBay, but yeah, I do have my eye on a few classic watches. If you've got any recommendations for different types, I mean, obviously you can tell I've got my pilot's watch, I've got my sort of my military watch, I've got a dress watch, I guess. I've got a couple of dive watches, some G-Shocks, some beaters, some you know, digitals. There's some sort of more exotic types of watches that I would like to, you know, test out, see if I like them. But you know, I don't really have a necessarily kind of a specific kind of taste yet. I'm just sort of picking and choosing and randomly just, you know, suck it and see, basically just trying things out. And yeah, like I said, I have bought quite a few watches which I thought, that's not for me, I don't like that, and I've sent them back. But all of these ones I do like for different reasons. Yeah, and yeah, anyway, I think I'll leave that there, otherwise I'll just keep waffling on. But yeah, I thought I'd share my current watch collection, and yeah, let me know what you think. I think I'm going to be wearing this one today. So peace out, and if I don't see you before, have a good Christmas, and yeah, catch you guys later.